The first light of dawn pushed through mist that clung to the valley floor. Jagged rocks and silent pines stood guard over a world waking in slow motion. Birds lifted into the air as shadows retreated. In that quiet moment, a question lingers. How did early humans fill every hour from sunrise to sleep? We picture epic mammoth hunts, but life was more than chasing giants. Cavemen balanced a web of small tasks, from watching the sky for storms to tending fires that could save their lives. Over the next 10 parts, we will trace their daily rhythms, how they woke, ate, worked, and rested in a world without clocks or calendars. Before full light, they lay very still. Breath came slow to avoid startling hidden prey. Eyes adapted to dim shapes, ready for movement. In those first moments, they practiced breath control to steady their hands. They scanned the sky for clouds and the ground for fresh tracks. A single hoofprint in soft earth meant deer had passed overnight. Pale glimmers in the clouds warned of rain that could flood low ground and sweep away traps. Each sign spoke of danger or promise. In silence, they rehearsed the tools and routes of the day. A hunter might close his eyes and picture the arc of a spear or the path through dense brush. A gatherer would remember stones used for grinding and places where edible roots grew. These mental preparations wove the day's plan before a single step was taken. That calm alertness set the tone for every following task. With senses sharpened and minds focused, they moved as one small band into a world that demanded constant awareness. How did they find and carry water to start the day? Early humans watched birds and animal trails to locate fresh water. Flocks flying low often headed to the nearest stream. Deer and boar tracks led to springs hidden in shaded groves. By following these signs, they found life's most vital resource. They carried water in simple vessels made from reed clusters tied with fiber or in hollowed bark cups. These containers held just enough to slake thirst without adding heavy weight. A single cup of water could be shared among several hunters on a long trek. Before drinking, they tested water safety by tasting a tiny sip, smelling for foul odors, and observing clarity. Clear water in a sunlit pool signaled low risk. Cloudy or scented water meant more caution or a fresh source farther upstream. They planned a water strategy for both the camp and the foraging parties. At dawn, they filled all available vessels and stored them near the hearth. Some water was poured into shallow bowls and left in sunlight to kill bacteria. Others were reserved for cooking or for cooling by placing them in shaded pools. By securing water first, they built a foundation for every other activity, gathering roots, tending fires, or hunting game. What came next after securing water and safety? At the first hint of light, they approached the hearth. Embers that glowed through the night were coaxed back to flame with small sticks and dry kindling. They blew gently on hot spots to feed the fire without smothering it. They gathered fuel in 2 stages. First, they picked the smallest twigs and leaves to restart flames quickly. Then they added larger branches and logs to build long-lasting heat for cooking and warmth. By midday, the fire burned bright enough to roast meat and boil bitter greens into safe stews. Elders taught young members how to control the burn rate. They showed how to stack wood so air flowed freely and how to remove ashes that stifled smoldering coals. Children practiced without fear of full blaze until they could rebuild the hearth themselves. The fire served as a community center. Its light and warmth drew the band together for shared meals and stories. Smoke kept predators at bay and signaled presence to distant groups. Fire held life in balance. Too weak and food went raw. Too fierce and it could destroy shelter. By mastering fire, cavemen secured their world. Each flame lit a path to cooking safety, social bonds, and protection against the night. Which plants did they gather to eat and medicine? They moved through meadows and forest edges with keen eyes. A slight curl in a leaf might mean lamb's quarters rich in protein. A cluster of red dots on a branch signaled ripe berries ready for tasting. Roots were found by probing soft earth with pointed sticks. Nuts lay under trees waiting to be collected in woven baskets. Seasonal knowledge guided their steps. In spring, they sought tender shoots of nettles and sorrel. Summer brought blackberries and service berries in shady groves. Autumn offered acorns and hazelnuts beneath oak and hazel trees. Winter held stored roots and evergreens like chicory leaves that survived cold snaps. Simple tools aided their harvest. A stone scraper peeled bark from roots. A sharpened bone tip pried tubers from the ground. Baskets made of woven grass held leafy greens without crushing them. Even bare hands were used carefully to avoid thorny branches or stinging nettles. Nutrition balanced caution. They knew which plants were safe by watching animal behavior and testing small bites. A tiny nibble of a new leaf was chewed, then spat out. If no burning or sickness followed, they gathered more. Toxic lookalikes like pokeweed were avoided forever once a bad reaction taught its lesson. Through careful observation and simple tools, early humans built a diet that combined roots, greens, berries, and nuts. Foraging was more than gathering food. It was a lesson in seasons, plants, and the fine line between nourishment and harm. How did they feed themselves when hunting was required? When plants were scarce or meat was needed for calories, they turned to hunting and scavenging. They tracked mid-sized game like deer and boar by studying footprints and broken twigs. Hunters moved quietly, feet soft on the forest floor, ready to strike when a grazing animal stepped within range. Opportunistic scavenging supplemented their diet. After large predators made a kill, cavemen followed tracks to find leftover meat. They knew how to avoid dangerous animals and arrived when predators had moved on. This practice saved energy when a full hunt was too risky or time-consuming. Spear crafting was central to success. They selected straight branches, peeled them of bark, and lash-sharpened stone points in place with sinew. Some spears were light for throwing. Others were heavier for thrusting at close range. Ambush techniques involved hiding behind brush or stalking along game trails until prey came within a few paces. After a successful hunt or scavenging find, sharing strategies kept the group strong. The largest cuts went to hunters and elders who led the chase. Children and gatherers received smaller portions to help their growth. Bones were broken open to extract marrow, and hides were saved for clothing or shelter. By combining patient tracking, clever scavenging, and well-crafted weapons, early humans filled their bellies and sustained their bands. Each step of the hunt was guided by experience, teamwork, and respect for the animals that fed them. What tools did they craft and maintain throughout the day? Early humans shaped stone into sharp tools through a process called flint knapping. They struck flakes from hardened rock to form blades and arrowheads. Each chip removed created an edge strong enough to cut meat or carve wood. Once they had a sharp tip, they attached it to a wooden shaft. They split a branch end and inserted the stone point. Then, they wrapped the joint tightly with animal sinew or plant fiber soaked in tree resin until it held firm. This hafting process turned loose flakes into reliable spears and knives. They also wove simple baskets, nets, and ropes from plant fibers. Long grasses and flexible bark strips were braided or twisted into containers for gathering berries and nuts. Nets made from cord could trap small animals or fish. Strong rope tied tools together or secured shelter frames. Tools broke or wore down through daily use. By midday, they paused work to inspect edges and bindings. A cracked handle was replaced with new wood. Blades were resharpened on flat stones. Sinew bindings were tightened or replaced before each hunt. This constant repair kept the band prepared for any challenge. Crafting and maintenance were essential chores that blended skill and creativity. Every member learned basic repairs so no one returned to camp unprepared. Through these hands-on tasks, early humans ensured their tools remained ready to support hunting, gathering, and shelter building. How did community life and social bonds fill their time? Tasks were divided by skill and need. Some members foraged plant foods, others hunted or scavenged meat. A small group tended the fire and prepared meals. This division of labor balanced effort and kept the band strong. They cared for elders' children and the injured with equal effort. An elder with wisdom, but a weak leg could guide decisions, while younger hunters carried extra weight. Children stayed close to elders who watched for danger. When someone was hurt, the group slowed and offered water or comfort. Before each expedition, they made decisions together. A leader might suggest a route to a berry patch, but everyone agreed on the plan. Voices spoke softly around the fire as they weighed risks for each task. Shared decision-making ensured that plans reflected the needs of all members. Oral traditions and raw storytelling passed on wisdom from one generation to the next. Around evening fires, someone retold a tale of a near miss or a great catch. Details of weather signs and animal habits were woven into each story. Through these simple narratives, young members learned skills and built bonds with their ancestors. Community cooperation turned survival tasks into shared experiences. By working side by side and speaking their history, early humans shaped strong social ties that carried each member through every challenge. When did they find time for rest and play? In the heat of midday, they paused in shaded spots. They sat on moss-covered stones or under broad leaves. Quiet reflection helped them calm minds and ease aching muscles. Some closed their eyes to listen to wind in the trees. Children seized these pauses for light games. They imitated adults by tossing small sticks in the air and catching them like spears. Others tracked imaginary prey through grass, practicing gentle steps that kept toes silent on earth. These playful contests built strength and stealth. Social rituals brought relief and joy. A single voice might begin a soft song that others joined in hums, or simple beats on hollow logs. Body movement and clapping eased stress and celebrated small successes. Laughter echoed across clearings as they shared jokes about clumsy chases. Downtime became another opportunity to teach. An elder might show a child how to tie a knot or arrange stones into a grinding slab. Without ceremony, these hands-on lessons passed skills effortlessly. The youngest watchers absorbed each motion until they could replicate it alone. Rest and play were as vital as work. By blending learning with lighthearted moments, early humans kept their spirits high. In these gentle hours, they replenished both body and community bonds. How did they prepare for evening and the night ahead? As the sun dipped behind distant hills, hunters returned with their day's catch. Sturdy baskets clinked with nuts and berries. Spear shafts rested against shoulders. Waterskins sloshed gently as they stepped through cooling air toward the camp. They performed final checks on traps and snares. A fox snare was examined for new traps or broken loops. Pitfall edges were smoothed back into the earth and covered until morning. Stored supplies of dried roots and seeds were counted and moved beneath shelters to keep them safe from scavengers. Evening cleanup was a careful ritual. Leftover scraps were hidden deep in the woods or buried beneath stones to avoid attracting hungry predators. Broken tools and bones were stashed away or repurposed into fire tongs or digging sticks. Each bit of waste became part of a hidden cycle that kept the camp secure. Before settling near glowing embers, they gathered around the fire to honor the day. Soft songs rose and fell with the crackle of flames. Hands were placed together in thanks for food and safety. A child might dance in the light while an elder offered a small ceremony by sprinkling ash into the fire as a prayer for tomorrow. As night closed in, they felt the balance of work and care that defined their world. The final glow of embers drew them close, binding each member in a moment of shared peace before sleep. What thoughts stayed with them as they drifted into sleep? When bodies grew heavy with rest, minds replayed the day's events. Hunters remembered the way a deer bolted at the last moment. Gatherers recalled the sweet taste of ripe berries and the sting of nettle leaves. Each success and failure was weighed against skill and chance. They planned tomorrow's routes by mapping star positions and wind directions. Leaders spoke softly of new foraging zones and water sources. Tasks were divided. One group would scout ridges for game, another would collect firewood for the coming dawn. Even as they prepared to sleep, roles and responsibilities were clear. Dreams and inner visions offered guidance for future actions. A dream of crossing a narrow river might inspire a new path to hidden springs. A vision of dark clouds gathering could warn them to reinforce shelters. Night before firelight was a time to listen to these inner messages and honor them quietly. In the fading glow of the hearth, they felt both small and connected to something vast. Embers turned to faint red spots, then to ash. Eyes grew heavy. The world beyond the circle of fire fell silent except for distant calls of night birds and the soft breath of friends. A final cinematic image drew their thoughts together, a lone ember drifting upward into a starry sky. In that moment, each person felt the cycle of survival and renewal. Sleep came as a gift, carrying them through darkness toward the promise of a new dawn. By tracing each hour of their lives from dawn vigil to firelight rest, we see that cavemen were not simple brutes, but thoughtful planners, skilled artisans, and caring members of tight-knit bands. Their daily routines rooted in survival cooperation and constant learning laid the groundwork for every later human achievement.